At 9:07 a.m., she raised the gavel like she owned our cul-de-sac. At 9:12, I hit play on a video of her white SUV nudging my mailbox and then flooring it, and the whole room went quiet, like somebody hit mute on Maple Crest. I didn't plan on being the guy who picks a fight with the HOA over a green metal box, but sometimes a line chooses you. If you've ever been talked down to with a smile that feels like a warning label, you know exactly what I mean. I live in Riverbend, North Carolina. Not fancy but tidy lawns, cut in diagonal stripes. Neighbors who wave from behind windshield glass, and an HOA that loves the phrase, community standards. I'm Evan Cole. I stitch people up on night shifts and try to keep my head down. But 3 smashed mailboxes in a month will rearrange your spine. First one, I chalked up to bad luck. Second one, I blamed on a delivery truck. Third one was a crime scene. Post-snapped letters blown across my yard like confetti in July, and a neon notice clipped to my porch that said, "Non-compliant 7 days to replace fines to follow." I called the HOA, of course, Lydia. Grant answered voice syrupy with something sharp underneath. "Dr. Cole, you signed the covenant rules, our rules." And I said, "Lydia, mailboxes in service fall under federal protection. Destroying one isn't a style preference, it's illegal." And she came back with, "If you didn't want rules, you shouldn't have moved here." Then hung up like the conversation was over. My hands were shaking. Not because I'm timid, because I could feel that old familiar thing, the one where someone with a clipboard decides you're smaller than their list. And I was tired of swallowing it. My neighbor Tom Reyes wandered over with a travel mug that wasn't coffee and said one word. Lydia and I said, "Yeah, that happened." He pointed at the wreckage and offered something simple. "I can sit watch, got a spare camera if you want it." And for the first time that week, the ground under my shoes felt steady. That night, I dug the Maple Crest covenant binder out of a cabinet that still smelled like the last apartment I lived in, flipped through paper. Nobody reads until a bully forces your hand, and there it was. Section 13.4 physical notice required, and 14 days to cure. Not 7, not an email, not a whisper on a porch, and I highlighted it like it was a map out of a maze. I printed the federal statute about tampering with mailboxes and slapped it on my fridge. Under a pineapple magnet. Looked ridiculous next to the grocery list, but it made the kitchen feel like a war room. Next day, I started walking the block with a little notebook and an open face. Not fishing for gossip, just asking what folks had seen Mrs. Porter in her porch chair with sweet tea, said she watched that white SUV back up. Slow look around and give my box a good love tap. Twice she handed me a scrap with most of the license plate. Micah the GoPro kid had 2 clips of the same SUV idling by my curb. On mailbox massacre days. The Petersons pointed out their mailbox is blue, and nobody ever said a word to them. You start to see the pattern once your eyes adjust. I called my friend Alan Chu. Does property law. Sent him the covenant page and the 7-day violation. And the photos, he said. They can regulate color and style, not brand or weight. Match their paint chip and show they skipped procedure and they're cooked. You don't need a lawsuit to turn on the lights. Start with a paper trail and make it public. So I did, and I had a little fun while I was at it. I ordered a steel box Forest. Green brass numbers. Nothing flashy. Just stubborn. Called my buddy Mark, who pours concrete and loves overkill. And we set a post so deep, the earth coughed rebar gravel. 2 bags of mix from the sidewalk. It looked like every other mailbox on the street. Inside it was a vault with a flag. I tucked a small camera up in the oak tree, with a clean angle on the curb, not hidden from the law. Just tucked away from petty hands, and right on cue. The next morning at 9 sharp, a white SUV rolled up. Lydia stepped out in a blazer that looked like it could iron itself. Clipboard tape measure. Little level, the whole theater. She measured height from the curb, checked setback, pressed both palms to the side, and shoved. Nothing tried a heel kick, like she was mad at a door that wouldn't open. Still nothing. Tom texted me from across the street. She just tried to shoulder check your mailbox. Mailbox 1. Lydia, 0. That afternoon, the maintenance truck came by. A guy tapped the box with his knuckles and laughed. Looks fine to me then. Later that evening, Lydia returned with reinforcements, her husband with a pipe wrench, big enough to close a city main, and the head of maintenance, who already looked like he regretted his choices. I stepped onto my porch like I'd remembered to water the tomatoes and said, "Evening, folks. You need directions? Or are we pretending this is an inspection?" Lydia said, "Your mailbox is unusual." I said, "Unusual isn't a rule. Color and style are rules, and this one's forest green with brass numbers, just like your sheet." I nodded toward the oak also. For everyone's awareness, federal law protects mailboxes. In service, tampering is a felony, and this is recorded. The maintenance head cleared his throat and said, "Mrs. Grant, it meets guidelines," and she burned holes through him with her eyes and left throwing gravel. The next morning, flyers showed up in everyone's mailbox except mine. Emergency HOA meeting. Threat to neighborhood standards. I stood in my driveway and laughed because that headline rode to my neighbors on the very thing she couldn't budge. So I spent the day walking door to door, not ranting. Just facts. Here's the clause with 14 days. Here's what a physical notice means. Here's the federal thing nobody wants to test. Did you get any surprise fines? And the stories poured out like a window finally cracked open. A bird feeder violation, a chalk hopscotch warning, a garage door letter for being open. 10 minutes too long, and yeah, the blue mailbox down the street that somehow never offended community standards. Meeting night smelled like vacuumed carpet and burnt coffee. Folding chairs were full. Lydia sat at the long table like a coronation was scheduled. Board members, tight and quiet, especially. Bill Ortega retired. Lawyer eyes that said enough. When public comment opened, Lydia tried to steer. "We are here to address a non-compliant structure, placed without approval, and I stood. Name's Evan Cole, and I'm here because my mailbox was destroyed 3 times, and then I was fined for not fixing it fast enough." I held up the covenant page with neon highlight. "This is your rule, 14 days physical delivery. You don't get to replace notice with the bumper of a car." A few folks chuckled in that sad way people do when they recognize the truth. Lydia banged the gavel out of order, and I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, "I don't think it is, then." I turned to Bill and asked him to read the section into the minutes. He did, slow and clear, and when he finished, I plugged my phone into the little projector they use for Yard of the Month slideshows and hit play. White SUV. Reverse lights. Tail lights. Dip the mailbox. Pops out of frame like a magic trick. Then a second clip from Micah's bike. Same SUV idling by my curb. Gasps a whispered, "That's her plate." Lydia leaned in, hard. Slander. And Bill said, "No." That's evidence, and the gavel cracked in her hand when she slammed it again. Mrs. Porter stood up and said, I saw it slow and deliberate, and the room didn't laugh. The room lifted her. I asked for 2 things: dismiss all fines and violations tied to my mailbox, and open an independent review into selective enforcement and procedural violations. Then I shut up because silence can be a tool, when the facts already did the talking. Bill rubbed his temple, asked for a motion. Hands went up mine. Didn't it? Wasn't close, he said. Motion passes all fines. Dismissed review committee, formed effective immediately. The president is suspended, pending outcome. He didn't look at her. He looked at us. And when the gavel fell once, clean, it sounded like a door unlocking. The next morning, a plain white envelope sat inside that steel green box. HOA letterheaded violation dismissed fines. Reversed refund issued. It wasn't jubilation. It was air in my lungs again. You know what I mean, and a week later, a recall petition started circulating. Not because I pushed it, because people who were tired of being policed into sameness were ready to test what community actually means. Lydia stormed porches, warning about chaos. And I guess chaos sometimes looks like a kid drawing chalk suns on the sidewalk and nobody calling it a crime. I won't spoon-feed you the ending, because the point isn't the scoreboard. The point is the turn. The moment the room stopped being scared of a clipboard and remembered boards exist to serve the people who pay the dues. The point is that a mailbox became a mirror, and a lot of us didn't like what we saw until we changed it. And personally, I changed too. I went from the guy who said, "Pick your battles," to the guy who picked one, and learned that bullies don't go away when you ignore them. They get bolder. And the cure isn't shouting. It's receipts and neighbors, and a voice steady enough to say one more sentence than you planned. So tell me, did I fight too hard over a mailbox, or did the mailbox show us what we were really up against? Where's the line between order and control? Protecting property values and policing people into sameness. Have you ever watched someone flash a title and use rules like a weapon? Drop your story in the comments. Push back, agree, argue. I'm here for the conversation. And if this hit a nerve, hit subscribe. Because we're going to keep talking about power bias and everyday courage right here. And I want to hear where you stand, right now.